Alrighty, how's it been going? Thanks for tuning in. So we're just going to do a bit of a live Q&A for running injuries, preventing and treating injuries. We're on Instagram and in my private coaching group. So thanks to anyone and everyone who's joined in. Feel free to shoot some questions across as we go through as well. But we've got a heap of content to work through tonight. So it's going to be pretty informative. I'll also post a replay on both platforms, so everyone can jump on and have a look if you didn't get to tune in, which is all good. So this is Chris. Chris is a physiotherapist and a bit of a keen runner himself. Also a bit of a guru when it comes to running sort of biomechanics and that sort of thing. So Chris, I'll just give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Too much now, but yeah. No, it's good to be here, guys. And yeah, so I'm a physio, just working at Instruct Alvin at Physio Yoga. A bit of a runner myself, like Sam was saying. Not as much as what he is, obviously. He's the guru, but yeah, I've done a lot of middle distance sort of runs and things. And yeah, working as a physio gives me a good opportunity to learn more about running and work with runners like Sam and other people. We've recently set up a treadmill here, so it's been good to look at some biomechanics and stuff and work on training loads and stuff. So yeah, good to be here. Hopefully we can answer some questions and got 2 cameras going, so I don't know where to look, but hopefully we can work it out.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. That's cool. Awesome. Yeah, again, some people joining in. So as I said, feel free to shoot any questions across. We'll answer as we go. How you on there, Ingrid? Thanks for joining. We've got a few on Instagram there too, so thanks everyone for tuning in. Let's perhaps kick it off with some of the questions that people have shot through already through the group and on Instagram. So I guess the first one that someone wanted to know, how do I tell the difference between fatigued muscles, as in DOMs, and muscles that are sore and could lead to injury? So I guess they're sort of talking about finding that balance there and not perhaps overusing muscles when they're already fatigued. So I guess you go a lot by feel with that.
I think the sort of time that pain lasts for is really important. So you'd expect your DOMs, like your delayed onset muscle soreness, to be there for around about 24 hours and be a muscular kind of feeling. If you're getting pain that's lasting for longer than that, or if it's any sort of nerve type feeling, or if it feels like it's deep in the joint or a bone kind of feeling, then we'd start to be a bit more concerned about it and say that back it off a little bit. Like Sam said, you go by feel a bit too. Like when you've experienced that DOM sort of feeling, you can recognise that it's really muscular in the way it is, compared to something like if you have overdone it a bit and your muscle tendons a bit irritated. That's another common cause. So yeah.
I guess another thing you look for is perhaps trends. So if you're training regularly and you're finding you're getting that same nagging pain as you're training through something, that would potentially lead. It could be the beginnings of an injury. Particularly, I guess you get a lot of tendons and things like that. So they start to inflame due to certain things. But
we'll go into that a bit more at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. We've had a heap of questions about lower leg injuries, so a fair bit of ground to cover there. But that's a good one, yeah. So it's just about finding that balance and I guess starting small and just knowing where you're at too in your exercise journey. So if you're just starting out, don't feel like you need to push yourself or overdo it. You're not really comparing yourself to anyone. Just listen to your body.
Yeah.
Cool. So can someone overtrain if they're doing something like couch to 5K or wanting to get back to parkrun as an example, and how can they identify it? I guess that kind of ties into the first question there.
Definitely.
Absolutely, you can overtrain. You can overtrain at any stage. It all just depends what your body is conditioned to, I suppose. Do you have anything to add?
I think it fits in nicely with that first question, and like we were saying before, the DOMs you'd expect to last around that 24 hours or so, and if it's lasting longer than that, then you'd be wanting to back it off a little bit. But I do think with the DOMs or with any sort of injury, it's a normal part of increasing your training. Like with those couch to 5Ks, they're nicely planned out programs, but they do increase, and it would be expected that you'd have some sort of level of pain sometimes with DOMs and that. But I think keeping that to sort of between 0 and 3 out of 10, if your pain starts creeping above that, we start to be a bit more worried, and then if it gets up into that 7 to 10, then that's a strong sign that you probably are overtraining, and that would be how I would identify it and say that maybe some changes to your training load would be worth thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Managing load is such a big and important thing, but it can, it seems simple, but it can be quite difficult to manage, even for I'm a struggle for it sometimes. You want to get back quicker than you probably should, but especially as we get older.
Do as we say, not as we do, though.
Exactly.
It's hard sometimes when it's yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess identifying as well, if you are overtraining, that is tricky, because the brain is quite powerful and can can tell you to push through things. But I guess like we said with that first one, just find that balance. And so I was trying to thought there were getting a few questions coming through.
That's cool.
My bad. So it's just identifying, just listening to your body and just being realistic with yourself too. If something is hurting, sort of think, why is this hurting? Am I pushing too hard? Or is this
an injury or something?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think these ones sort of tie in with some of the ones up there.
Yeah.
But maybe skip down to there or something.
Yeah, we might do that. Yeah.
Because there was also this one about major surgery too. So.
Yep, for sure. Cool. So this one maybe that might tie in with the surgery too. So we got a couple there. How to return to running after major surgery, and also the best way to get back into running from a period of doing nothing. So I guess that's kind of similar. And someone's also asked how far should each run be. That's how long is a piece of string, I suppose. I mean, getting to train loads, it's all going to come down to individual recoveries. Are you just doing nothing, or if you're recovering from surgery, that's sort of a much bigger kind of fish to tackle there. Perhaps you could hit on the surgery side of things first. And then
I guess it depends a lot on the type of surgery. But any kind of major surgery, if we're talking about something that's involving your spine or your core or a hip or a knee or something, there'd be quite a few sort of check boxes that we'd want to tick before you're getting back into running. And it also, like Sam's saying, there's no recipe for anyone really, and it depends a lot on how long you've been out for and things like that. But I think there's a few tests that I would go through with people if I was trying to address whether they were ready to run, and some of those physical type of tests that I think would be worth doing you'd want to make sure you're able to walk for about 30 minutes without any issues, performing your normal kind of daily activities like doing the shopping or the washing or doing your job and stuff like that. There's a couple of measures for the strength in our legs to just get a bit of an idea of how much strength we have in those areas. I think I'd like to see someone do it standing on one leg for 10 seconds or more and remaining balanced. Doing some single leg squats, and with when you come to see a physio about that, we want to look at the control of those things too. So be looking for around about 10 reps of nice controlled single leg squats. Jogging on the spot for about a minute. If you can't jog on the spot for a minute, it's going to be hard to go for a proper run, so that would be something we'd like to look at too. Some jump squats, 10 to 15 of those, and then getting to some more advanced type of things like bounding or hopping. So hopping over a little step or over a little line on the floor or something. That's a really good way to look at your ankle control. So I'd probably run through all of those things. Particularly like walking for 30 minutes and then doing some of those lower limb strength and control kind of tasks. If you can tick off all those things, I think there's no reason why you can't get out and go for a run. Even if you can't knock all of them off perfectly, I would just obviously suggest a nice graded return to running, and starting with 5 minutes or so and seeing how your body responds to that. I think 5 minutes is a really good place to start, and then monitoring your pain after that. So if you do something that leads to, like we said before, that middle ground of pain, like 4 or 5 out of 10, and that lasts for 24 hours, we're not too concerned. But if you're limping around for a few days after, and everyone that sees you is like, oh, what have you done? Then again, probably going back to some more basic exercises or the walking or some strength training and stuff first. But yeah, like I said at the start, there's no real recipe. And I know that lots of people who do run regularly probably can't do 10 single leg squats with a lot of control. So that's our sort of best attempt at finding some running relevant type things. But yeah, to be honest, you could probably still have a go without those, but just take it easy. Yeah. Does that answer it okay?
I think so, yeah. I think some important things too is it's okay to take a step backwards too, and again, kind of toe the line between sort of, pushing to see, where that pain or the injury is at, and I guess that's where things like jumping and sort of readjusting sort of to the load and things like that come into play. But also, it's also okay to, think, I'm here, but maybe I need to just take a step back for a week or 2 weeks and just sort of, slowly transition myself back into where I want to be. Actually, the Russians have a funny saying, obviously they founded plyometrics and stuff like that. They say when you stop jumping, you die. So they're pretty blunt, but jumping is always a good thing. You might have that strength and control, but your body still might not be quite adjusted to that load.
Landing controlled and stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, play around with it and have a go. We just had another question come in there that we can probably cover that with some of the other
last simple one,
where are we up to? Again with the I suppose specifically with your running, like Chris said, coming back from injury, starting with 5 minutes. If you can run for 5 minutes, that's probably a good place to start. If you can't run for like 1 minute, then you probably shouldn't be running. It's all going to come down to personal.
There's no real recipe, but no. I mean, I like the sort of 10% rule per week. So if you start with 5 minutes, add 10% onto that the next week, so you're going sort of 5.5 minutes, and then you're going 6, or gradually increasing it. But if you're someone, if Sam goes and has surgery on, I don't know, something, and then he has to bounce back from that, I don't think he's going to be running 5 minutes for long. So he might go by 20% each week or something. It really just depends on the person themselves. But it's maybe worth having a chat to someone about the specific situation if it is one of those major surgeries or something, or if it's a joint surgery. If it's just the general deconditioning, I like the 5 minutes to start, and then the 5% rule, 10% rule each week.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah. So moving on, how important is stretching and strength training?
It's a bit of an interesting one. There's some debates around that.
So. There is.
Go first.
Stretching for me is if something's tight, you stretch it, but there can also be some confusion around does it need to be stretched, or is it just not conditioned to that load? So I guess occasionally you might find if you're having pain sort of at the end ranges of a muscle, and Chris, feel free to jump in and correct me, but with some my theory on it. But if it's sort of if it's something that's persisting and it's sort of not sort of within the meat of the muscle, and it's sort of more towards the ends, I feel like it's more of a connective tissue type thing where you shouldn't really be focusing on stretching but more on strengthening and perhaps loading it up with some isometrics and that sort of thing. I feel like if stretching works for you and it makes you feel good, by all means do it, and it certainly does have its purposes. I just don't think it's quite as crucial as people kind of make it out to be. Maybe I
think you touched on some good points there, and I think stretching probably 15 years ago would have been a lot more popular. Like physios would be prescribing stretching a lot, and it will still happen for certain conditions. But yeah, there's been some interesting research in the last couple of years, or in the last 5 or so years. I can post some links and things if people are interested in looking into it. But it depends on what you're trying to achieve from your running, so it does depend on your goals. But there was some studies recently that talked about stretching and sprinting, and interestingly they found that stretching before sprinting actually made your times worse, because our body almost in our legs, to simplify it a lot, works a bit like a coiled up spring. And if you think about like a tightly wound spring for something like sprinting, that's what you want, and you don't want a spring that's sort of been stretched out a bit like a floppy slinky or something. So you can go too far with the stretching if you're really focused on your sprinting. There's not much evidence to talk about, with stretching. There's not much evidence to suggest that it will actually reduce many injuries either. But we're talking about scientific evidence, in the physio world. But I do think, like Sam said, it does feel good and it's a nice routine to have. And if you do it regularly and you like doing it, I think you should certainly keep doing it. There's some areas of the body that I think it's really beneficial for running, particularly in around some of those hip muscles, or a little bit of hamstring flexibility is important. But yeah, I think hips and hip flexors, because if we end up with really tight muscles around those areas and we can't get into that hip extension, so stand up, hopefully that works on the camera.
Yeah.
If we can't get into that hip extension, which is getting our leg back behind us when we're running, then that can be due to tight hip muscles, and that can lead to us not having any force actually propelling us forward. We have more force that's sort of propelling us up and down, and we use a lot of energy on that. So if you're really tight around those areas, stretching by all means I'd go for. And probably good news for a lot of people, like I don't think it's an essential part of running in particular. Like Sam said, if you love it, do it. But I think a lot of the time a bit of strength work is more effective and can prevent the muscles from getting tight as well. So
I think more adjusted to load you are, the less likely you are to tighten up as well. So I think like all endurance athletes, I believe, should be doing some form of strength work. And I guess that kind of leads into another question we had here about what are some great stretches before a football game, to be very specific. So for me personally, I wouldn't stretch. The only thing I would stretch, and this is just based on my personal structural kind of makeup, is just hip flexors, because I do get very tight through there. So especially
that's what we were saying.
So if I was going to go play footy, where you are going to be, in a lot of flexion and extension of hips, and I would want to get a bit of mobility through there pre-game. But really, I'd be focusing on dynamic warm-ups and just building up loads slowly, which is what I would probably recommend for runners to not a lot of stretching, because you don't want to be tearing muscle fibers before you go and do some sort of endurance work or sprinting. Like I said.
I think those static stretches are a bit out of date, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Those dynamic sort of warm-ups and ballistic stretching, where you're sort of swinging your legs through, or where you're practicing those rotation type movements. Yeah. Everything suggests that that's a much more effective way of warming up than just sitting there and reaching for your hamstring kind of thing. So. Yeah, absolutely. I guess you think about the needs of what you're doing. So just getting your body ready for doing what it is you're planning on doing. So. Which ties into what we're talking about with footy there and everything. So, but I guess dynamic warm-ups, just be creative a little bit. Maybe I think something that I always think is a good idea for football and basketball and things like that, where you're sort of kicking or shooting or doing something, is starting small. So if you're on the footy field and you're warming up, start with 10-metre kicks and do that for a couple of minutes, then 20-metre and sort of 30 metres on the run and that kind of thing, where you sort of just getting used to the movement, and it's not a lot of load. It's only 10 metres, then it's only 20, then it's 30. Before you go out and do a 50-metre bomb or something like that, that's when your body's not prepared for it, and you're likely to get injured or tear a hamstring.
Someone just put through on Facebook about foam rollers and other torture devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're actually, I like foam rolling but it's more of a, to release, it's not the same as stretching, is it? So it's, you can probably touch on this a bit better than I can.
Yeah, I think it fits into that same category. Like, I don't think there's a whole lot of real strong evidence saying that, everyone must foam roll after running, but a lot of people love it, and from time to time I'll hop on and have a go, and I think it does help, with that muscle soreness afterwards sometimes, and just can help with those ranges of motion around the hips or the calf and things. So I like it for that type of thing. It's one of those things that it doesn't probably work in the way that we think it works. Like, a lot of people think, I'm actually rolling out my ITV muscle and rolling out like pizza dough and stretching it out. There's no real evidence to show that, but it does still increase blood flow to the area, and muscles are made up of a lot of percentage of water. So when you do something like rolling out the quad or the hamstring, it's almost as if you are squeezing the water out of a tea towel or something, and then letting that water come back in. So it does sort of replenish the muscle in that way. That's one of the theories as to how it works. And it can just kind of distract our brain a little bit too. So it can send those messages in and remind our brain, we do have a really tight muscle there. Let's see if we can put some energy into that and let it loosen off. So I'm a fan myself, but I think maybe there's some running purists that might not recommend them as much, because scientifically they don't have as much evidence as strength training or something like that. But I still think if you like doing it, they're a nice thing to do, especially if you have one muscle that you notice after the run you're always a bit tight in and you're just feeling a bit, your movement is reduced in your hip or your calf or something. I think it's a good thing to do there. Yeah,
awesome. And I think maybe one other thing that I sort of find with foam rolling, it's just my personal opinion, but if you're doing it regularly, so say you foam roll after every run, after every workout, you're gonna sort of get a bit of feedback from your body too. So you might start to notice, my left hamstring is starting to hurt a lot more when I foam roll now. So maybe there's something going on there.
Yeah, that's good.
So there's a few bits and pieces like that.
Do you use any of the other torture devices?
Me, I have a height vault which I use.
What's that?
So like a massage gun. So,
cool.
Which I like. But it's one of those things. If you have if you hold a bit of tension in a muscle, it's good to release it. Again, it just works the same as foam roll.
Yeah.
But again, if you're doing it regularly, it's probably not. I guess it falls into the same category. There's all these things.
Like, it's not going to fix the problem, but it might make you feel good and then be more flexible and you can perform a bit better.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think, it's not going to fix those long-term problems.
Yeah. To give you a bit of context, I bought the massage gun because I was having some consistent tightening through my right hip flexor, so it was just always flaring up and always coming inflamed, and I just needed something to really, because foam rolling wasn't cutting it, so I just needed something to really just free it up and relax it while I kind of rehab that. So, but what I did to rehab that was build more strength through my glutes, glute med, and just getting more activation, and sort of promoting recruitment, I suppose, of those posterior muscles, rather than being anterior focused. So that was probably the biggest thing that helped me work through that injury, rather than the actual massage device. So.
Yeah, cool. I guess, there's the other, like the spiky balls and the things that do look like pizza dough rollers. I think we've got a couple around here somewhere, maybe in the other room. I think they all have their place, and certain ones are better for different muscles. Like the little spiky balls, I think are really effective on your feet, for example. I would use that quite a lot, because I think with the way that we live our lives these days, we all wear shoes most of the daytime. And a lot of our shoes are a bit too narrow for our feet, so we can end up with a bit less ability to absorb shock through our feet. So I think regularly rolling your foot on a golf ball or one of those can be a nice idea. All those other things, like the pizza dough roller things, they can get to some of the other spots that the foam roller finds a bit hard, like adductors, like inner thigh muscles. That's a spot for me that I have had a bit of trouble with in the past, and if I go for a run that's longer than what I normally do, where I sort of fatigue through some of my glutes and things, I have a tendency, or if it's on an unstable surface or a bit slippery or something, I'll often finish up and have a really tight sort of inner thigh adductor sort of area. And loosening that off can really help my hip range of motion, which then stops me from getting a tight lower back and things like that. So just working out in your own body what it responds to. And like Sam said, it's a good idea having, if you do some rolling afterwards, you might get some awareness and notice, oh yeah, my right side is always a lot tighter. Maybe there's some weakness around there to address, or maybe that's, if I do get a sore back or something else, that might be something that's contributing to it. But I do think there's a place for them. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, if it helps you personally, then stick with it. That's no way to tell you otherwise, I guess.
Yeah.
What else have we got here?
Anything up here that we might see? What if you're really stubborn?
What if you're really stubborn? Well, that's probably not something we can. All comes down to the individual, I think. So.
Yeah, it's pretty hard, I reckon. Like, especially, I think a lot of the problems we come across are from overtraining and you know, prioritizing, pushing ourselves really hard because we're stubborn, and not prioritizing that recovery side of things in terms of getting a good night's sleep and hydration and doing your recovery type stuff, and I don't know, eating healthy and all those kind of things. And then I think it's easy to be stubborn when in the day and age of Strava and stuff like that, where everyone sees all your training and you sort of feel like, oh, if I go out and just go for a slow run, everyone's going to judge me. And like they're things that I think are bit hard to deal with, but everyone is going through the same thing with all that. And I think sometimes having other people that, like this group that Sam's got, that you know everyone's on the same page with exercising and keeping each other accountable, I think that's an awesome way to maybe help with that a little bit and talk to people about it, because they're probably all going through the same thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
I don't know.
No, sure. Well, just kind of related, but not really. Sort of related, maybe. Just with the running stuff. One tactic that I use if you are time poor and you're trying to get a good workout in is what I call like a pyramid sort of run. So basically, maybe if you're doing like an hour run, the first sort of 20 minutes of your run, you might sort of build up your speed. So you might, just as an example, start at 5 minute Ks, then sort of go 4:45, 4:30, 4:15 to get up to 4 minutes. So like that center portion, that center 20 minutes. So then you have kind of 20 minutes at a higher click, and then you use the last 20 minutes of your run to just kind of taper back down. So that's a good way to sort of get warmed up and then kind of cool down as well in a way. With the if you are stubborn, or you don't have time, or you just can't be bothered recovering or warming up, that is a nice sort of way to kind of integrate it. It might not be the best way, it might not work for you, but it's better than maybe nothing. So and you still get that sort of that high intensity kind of portion in the middle. So
Definitely.
But that is a strategy I use frequently as well. So what do we got next? We might be up to the big one here.
What's the big one?
The lower leg. Oh, and we've got a few other bits and pieces.
We can talk about some of the lower leg stuff.
Yeah, how about we dive straight into it?
Kind of got a few that are all tied in with each other, don't we? So I guess we had how to strengthen calf muscles to prevent injury, particularly the soleus and tendinopathy issues. We had an Achilles tendinopathy question, a prevention of shin splints, a question about plantar fasciitis, and Sally on the live has written some stretches for tight calves, so they probably all tie in with each other okay. Is the camera getting a bit dark, or do we need to move anything, or everyone can see us okay? These lights aren't the best.
No, maybe maybe just drop a comment if you can't see us, but it is a little bit darker, isn't it?
Maybe that's better.
A touch better.
But I guess we can sort of talk about all those things and one by one. I think, was it Jade who asked the question about the soleus and the tendinopathy?
Don't quite remember who asked that one.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's alright. So I guess all this sort of lower body stuff kind of ties into a lot of things. I think ankle mobility is quite a overlooked aspect of mobility, and again that's sort of that's a huge topic that we probably can't really cover in enough at the moment.
Ingrid, yeah, she said no.
Okay, cool, awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
So I think that comes down. That can be like shoes. That can be gaits. That can be. That can stem all the way up to your hips. So you have hip instability or hip weakness. If you don't have good mechanics from the top down, you can lose a lot of mobility. Do you have much to kind of touch on
with the ankle mobility stuff in particular? Yeah. Like you're saying, it's hard to be overly specific with all of that, but I do think, you touched on I think definitely shoes play a bit of a role in that, and I think past ankle injuries, like, if you've played netball or basketball in the past, you can almost guarantee that you've had a few ankle rolls, and that can affect some of the activation of muscles around the outside and the inside of our calves that can kind of compress our ankle joint. And the joint itself can get stiff pretty easily. So there's certainly some treatment tips or stretches and things that can be helpful for that. With Sally's question about the calf stretches, like my favourite few of those, I guess, are just the simple ones, sort of pushing up against the wall. Is it worth sort of just showing that over here, or is that going to be too hard?
Maybe
over here when the camera's sort of pointing, but Sally, you probably can see okay, but just the one where you're pushing into the wall with your heel on the floor, that's going to get your biggest calf muscles, the gastrocnemius. The same stretch as that, but letting your knee bend a little bit will get your soleus muscle in through the back there, so a bit lower down on the calf. And then I also like just standing on the edge of a gutter or the edge of a step or something and just bouncing from heel to heel behind, just to get a gradual bit of an increase in stretch through there. If you've got some other muscles on the outside of the calf that get really tight, you can be a bit more specific with using like a TheraBand or a loop or something to get your ankle on different angles. I think if you're doing all of those and potentially foam rolling on the calf, that would be a really good place to start with tight calves. And like the one before with the spiky ball under the foot, that has a big impact on the calf too, because that's our first shock absorbing mechanism, and if that's not doing its job, then the calf often does more of that job and can get tight from that. So
yeah, definitely. This is probably one specific place where you would say foam rolling is probably a really good option. Also, I think just getting your foot into its end ranges of motion too with the ankle, because we do spend a lot of time walking in shoes that perhaps don't promote proper movement of the foot. So just getting that kind of movement back in your ankle can sometimes just be enough to kind of free things up and getting some foam rolling through the Achilles and that sort of stuff to just kind of just get things moving again. What other?
There was a couple of other questions around that area, wasn't there? So
I think maybe plantar. Someone commented about plantar pain as well.
I think plantar fasciitis and the Achilles tendinopathy type of issues, and they do sort of fit in as overuse type injuries. Too much load going through the plantar fascia, which runs along the bottom of the foot, or too much sort of uncontrolled load going through the Achilles tendon, and Ingrid identified the soleus muscle, which is an important one in controlling that sort of movement. So when our foot hits the floor when we're running, we call that the heel strike, and then our weight transfers through the foot, and we need that movement to be controlled, and the muscle that's responsible for that hugely is the soleus, and when we're running, it goes through loads of it's about, I think it's 5 or 6 times our body weight goes through that muscle when we're running, so it's quite a lot, and it's a pretty small muscle, so having a good control through that is quite important. One of the exercises, like a really simple one, is just doing calf raises, but doing them in a sitting position, so just sitting with your knees bent to about 90 degrees, putting some weights on top of your knees, doing some calf raises there and making sure it's slow and controlled. That's a really effective way to start strengthening the soleus. There's some other a bit more, there's a couple of good tests that I like to go through with runners, and one of them is getting into like a lunge position and then trying to do a calf raise when you're in that lunge, and just noticing if there's any differences from side to side with that. Often we'll find some soleus weakness in that area there, which can have an effect on the whole rest of the lower limb. So I think that's quite relevant, because if you're not controlling that movement where you heel strike and then your weight starts to move over that foot, if you're not controlling that, that puts loads through the Achilles tendon, and that can definitely be a precursor to the Achilles tendinopathy stuff. So yeah, the soleus is one of those kind of underappreciated muscles, I think, and a good one if you're having a few persistent issues in that area. I think that was most parts of that question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers the question, Ingrid.
Yeah. Something else to look at, I suppose, with lower body stuff too, or lower leg stuff is your running form and your technique. So, I know you talked about the heel strike sort of motion, and for some people that's fine. But I always say if you're having pain when you run, the first place you should look is where your foot is interacting with the ground. So, you can heel strike and get away with it, and sometimes you can't. So, I tend to find if you're a true classic heel striker, you're going to lose a lot of mobility in that ankle and calf, because your calf just isn't interacting like it should. It's not flexing as you're running, and then you find you roll an ankle or something where your foot suddenly does move like it should, and you put that extra tension and stress on. It can be the Achilles or the calf, and that's when you can have those little flare-ups, which then build into bigger things. So, I mean, without getting too far into that, that really is a case-by-case thing. But if you are having ankle pain or calf pain persistently, perhaps look at the way your foot is interacting with the ground, or just try some range of motion stuff and some mobility stuff too, and then see how you go. So
I think that answers that. No,
that's
good.
Cool.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a different sort of natural pattern that they adapt to with running, but like Sam's spot on, certain foot strike patterns will put different load on different areas. So particularly if you're getting tied up the front of your calves, we call that anterior compartment syndrome from running, and that is definitely the loads are increased on that with heel striking, or I think it's also increasing on your knee joint as well. So most people will be sort of just a midfoot strike from the data. So that's where most people fit in. But it's not something I would try and play around with too much unless it's identified as being a bit different, because most people just have their own way of doing it and their body works out how to go about that. Yeah.
Definitely, and I think you might even find too, if you're having pain, just getting some strength through the posterior muscles can be helpful sometimes, just to alleviate and make them sort of absorb the impact better. But again, case by case. Everything's case by case.
It's a shame there's no recipe. It would be a bit
easier.
It would just be like you have to do that and then that. But
someone I love this question. Someone's wasn't even a question. They just wrote ankles like used bubble wrap. So I'm guessing that comes down to maybe perhaps some sort of structural instability. So perhaps they're rolling their ankle a lot, which is common in I guess
netball, basketball,
yes,
footy and stuff.
Exactly. Court sports, so change of direction stuff. So maybe it's. Do you have any advice on perhaps the lateral component of ankle strength? Or is it just a byproduct of the game they're playing?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. The used bubble wrap, I haven't heard that one before, but maybe there's a condition, bubble wrap, bubble wrapitis or something. I don't know. But it's I guess it could be something to do with those past injuries or tight muscles around the calves, or if it's truly giving you severe pain, then maybe some sort of other thing going on in there as well. Really hard to say.
Very good analogy though.
I like it.
what else? So I think we just about covered most things.
Yeah.
Any other stuff there?
Yeah, there's talk one about the range of motion for tired bodies.
Yeah. So I guess range of motion exercises. There are. I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but there is something called controlled articular rotations.
I don't know too much about that either.
Yeah, so it's basically just again, I don't really know enough about it, but if you're interested, perhaps Google it. It's just about kind of getting your body into like end range positions and then trying to like move through it while holding that extreme end range. So I guess it's kind of about like building strength and control within that sort of that really really extreme end range of motion. So definitely something to look into if that is what you're concerned with. But again, I don't really know enough about it. But yeah, certainly that is. I mean, getting into end range is probably always a good thing, just to sort of test your limits and make sure you are comfortable with that, because I guess you can find too once you sort of get to that extreme end range, especially hips. Like, I'm speaking from personal experience, getting to sort of full flexion for me on my hip, I tend to kick out a bit. So if you're having something like that halfway through a movement and you're not sort of tracking nicely, then perhaps it may cause some issues. So it's always good. Those sort of things are always good just to test as well, and then you get a good gauge of where you are at, I suppose, truly. So, but yeah, I think that's really about it. Covered a fair bit of ground there.
Yeah.
So if anyone else has any other questions to shoot through quickly. Wayne has posted one we missed there. I've just learned the importance of getting shoes fitted properly. Any key tips for when you select your shoes? I always say when you're buying shoes, make sure it's super comfortable. And if you're buying running shoes, go for a little run in them. Comfort that you experience in the shop is going to be a big discomfort when you start running some serious miles. So it needs to be 100% comfortable when you buy it.
Yeah, I know there's some places that will actually measure up your foot and put you on the scanner and identify a shoe that is supposed to be best for you. I've never had that done, sorry Wayne, so I can't speak from experience about that, but I know a lot of my friends that are into running have done that and spoken really highly about those things. So that might be worth doing. Yeah, Sam can probably talk more about that than I can. But I also would put a lot of emphasis on the shoes that you wear for the rest of the day and the rest of your life. And like if you're wearing you might be wearing the best running shoe and the ideal shoe for you, but if you're going to work and wearing a really tight fitting boot or a high heels or something like that, it's going to be hard for you for that hour that you're running. Your body's not just going to suddenly switch into a really nicely movable foot that's going to absorb shock and things like that. It's going to be stuck in those patterns that you've spent 8 hours doing. So and from my own personal experience, I did used to wear shoes to work that were good shoes by all accounts normally. Like I think I used to just wear New Balance kind of sneakery type things and nice soft and cushy, so really comfy. But they did lead to a bit of tightness on that posterior chain of my body, just because I think my foot forgot how to sort of go into full Achilles tendon stretch, and it just started a bit of tightness in my body. And I did change to some more flatter, wider shoes, like Birkenstock style of thing, and that has made some big differences to my overall flexibility of my hamstrings and even things like back pain. And so that would be where I would be focusing my attention a bit. But I think if you've probably had a good experience with your measuring up of the shoes. So
well, I mean, you just get an idea of where you're at in that moment. So it's not going to tell you where you should be or what you should be doing, but it's going to tell you exactly what you are in that moment. It's going to tell you the right shoe for you. But I totally agree with the foot thing, because our bodies are constantly adapting to new environments, and I mean, you think about anything, you can build strength in 4 weeks. So if you've spent 20 years wearing restrictive shoes, your body is very, very adapted to that. So like you said, if you spend 8 hours a day in high heels and you try and go for a run, your calves are going to be tight because they haven't been in in flexion for 8
Yeah.
hours a day. So that is something to be very aware of. So footwear is very, very important. So that point about shoes for while you're not running is
Cool,
for sure, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we like that message is getting better too nowadays. I think people are sort of getting a better understanding of how their feet sort of interact and that sort of thing, and how we should probably be living with shoes and footwear. But I always say like running shoes and sneakers, they serve a purpose. So they're probably not something you should be wearing all the time, because they're running shoes or athletic shoes. So just something really to be very aware of.
It's not, don't get me started on shoes that everyone wears every day and stuff, because it's an area that frustrates me a bit, because
Definitely.
I do, there's some shocking shoes that people walk around in, and I mean, fashion is important obviously, but I don't know. Don't want to go into it.
I think the key thing is to look for something flat, so you're not you are getting a nice kind of ankle movement, and then you can look at stuff that's wider as well to help your feet spread. But like I said, that's a big rabbit hole to go down right now. So maybe we'll do a whole Facebook Live and we can talk about that. I think that's pretty well covered everything. But maybe Chris, I might just get you to, because you do a lot of you do some gait analysis sort of stuff. Perhaps do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit maybe on perhaps when you're getting someone on the treadmill, what sort of things are you looking for that might be something people can then be aware of? Perhaps?
It's a good question. So we we'll just have a bit of a jog on the treadmill using a camera that we look from running technique from behind and then from each side, and we just look at generally whether someone is putting more weight through one side of the body than the other, whether there's some postural things to think about. Like lots of people, you see two different types of runners: the runners that really lean forward, that puts more pressure on our knees and things like that, whereas you see some runners that really lean back as they're running and looks like they're looking up at the sky the whole time. That can put some pressure on the hips or the pelvis or the lower back and those sort of areas. We try and have a look at how much ankle bend is happening when someone's running and compare side to side. So, if you're doing more of an ankle flexion and one side's bending too much, that can be something that can affect your Achilles tendon. Whereas vice versa, if you're not bending enough, then it's going to change how your weight bearing from side to side. Another thing that can put more pressure on gluteal tendons, like outside of the hip tendons or knees themselves, like tension down the ITBs and stuff like that, can be how wide apart your stance is when you're running. So some runners tend to run with feet really close in together, so it's almost as if they're running along a tightrope or something like that, which is not a very optimal style for those type of conditions. So the sensitive outside of the hips or the even the patellofemoral kind of tightness around the kneecap and stuff. So a cue that I might give for that would be to run with feet a bit wider apart, as if you're running along like a little mini train line or something like that. There's some of the common types of things that I see with technique. I guess that addresses the most common things seem to be the calf pain and Achilles tendinopathy, the foot pain, the knee, and maybe the hip tendinopathy on the outside of the hips. So
interesting.
A few little things you think about there, but we don't try and mess around with technique too much, because like I said before, everyone's got their own natural way of running, and often it's about finding where the weaknesses are and strengthening those things, or unless there's one specific thing that really stands out. And sometimes even talking about how many steps we're taking. So a lot of us probably have watches that will measure our cadence, and sometimes changing your cadence, usually speeding it up, so more steps per minute will naturally create some of those other things and take some of the pressure off the knees or the hips or the ankles. So that's a sort of simple one to have a look at if you're running and you're getting some injuries and things, and then you check your cadence and it's 140 or something, or 130 per minute, maybe trying to increase it by 10%. People say the magic number is 180, but I think that's a little bit one of those things that I don't like people saying, like a recipe.
Yeah.
So, but I do think if you're dramatically below that, maybe speeding it up a little bit would take some of the pressure off those joints.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And the stride length is important because it's going to change the way you interact with the ground. So,
yeah.
Again, it's not something to live and die by. It's just something to, I guess, very aware of if
you're having problems. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I reckon that's probably we've covered everything that we have.
Yeah.
Looks like everyone's had their fill. So thanks to everyone who tuned in, whether it was for the whole time or just a little bit. But,
thanks guys.
Yeah, always awesome to do this, have a bit of interaction, and hope we delivered some informative content there for you. Answered a few questions, perhaps gave you some insight on something you weren't quite sure on. But absolutely hit us up after the fact too if you have any other questions or anything. I'm always happy to answer them. So thanks so much guys for tuning in, and thanks Chris for joining me.
No, thanks for having me, Sam. That was good fun. Yeah, we'll have to do it again with some other topics and stuff. So
absolutely,
awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Thanks guys.
Thanks.